Well, good evening to you and welcome to this program of Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Deon Abrams, and on this program this evening, we're going to continue to deal with current political issues here in Guyana. With me on the program this evening to do that is my usual colleague, Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, and so this evening we're going to be looking at the happenings here in Guyana. I want to welcome you, Brother Tacuma, to the program this evening.
As usual, it's always good to come whenever we could do the program. You know, the last time we were here was 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
People have been calling and asking, why we're not there.
Sometimes the current situation, life's, issues may prevent us from getting here, but we do try to fill in for that. Last week, I think it was important that
Yes.
we air the discussion so that WPA's perspective on
Budget.
the budget would have been aired, and I believe that was an enlightening discussion. And so possibly at some point we can air it again to discuss, to have people understand what the WPA's views are in relation to the budget. I mean, the primary concern, apart from the fact that the $500 billion that is in, that they have in the budget, that it is skewed in a particular direction, both ethnically and by class, I mean, is a primary concern. And you dealt with that, Ogun, and the possible likely effects of that kind of distribution of the resources of the nation, that really giving patrimony to one set of people really is not good for the nation. But you also, I noticed you wrote a letter recently to the newspapers, and you were expressing your concern about a concern that you did air on this program about the unions and their lack of response to the government's treatment of the public sector workers. Have you gotten any feedback from, or was it published?
The letter was published by Stabrook News, and it was published by Village Voice.
Okay.
In their daily edition. I want to start from where we left off the last time in the program, to revisit two issues that I raised.
Okay.
When we left that program, I wasn't certain whether the government had made any allocations to public sector workers' wages and salaries.
Right.
And I was prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt until clarity evolve on the matter. But since then, we know for sure, beyond any doubt, that they have not put into the budget any allocations for increases in public sector workers' wages and salaries. So we know that now for a fact. And we also know that they show such a great contempt and disrespect for the workers that they didn't even state a commitment, to deal with the question of public sector workers' wages and salaries. And this is a government coming from a party that would profess to be a working class party, and would profess to be all kinds. I mean, we got to hold the PUP, the foot to the fire, because they make all of these fancy declarations, but then when you watch the actions, I mean, not to totally ignore the working people, to totally ignore the people who the state employ, to keep the machinery of the state and the country going, to totally ignore them and to treat them the way in which they have been treated in this budget, create a precedence that will be negative for all workers, because the private sector, people who come in the country, whether it's oil, whether other industries, other investments, that is the standard that the government have set, that workers' wages and salaries and workers' interests are not important in this equation, so that is crystal clear, But My concern is, as I said, the second concern was the union's reaction. As I made the point on the last program, that in the earlier days, soon after the budget, the very day after the budget is being read, unions would have been given their responses to the budget, and I was very concerned that we weren't seeing that from the unions. Now it's almost 2 weeks, and I've been checking the papers daily, to see if I could see the union's response to the budget, and I haven't found one. I don't know if you happen to be stumbled on any. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I read every single thing that is there, but I think something like that would be prominent, and I'm trying to work on, because this is important, because on this program, I mean, we're a political party, and the WPA approach to unions historically has been, we try to build a partnership with unions. We try to help them in their struggle. We try to give political directions to them, but we don't try to get into the business to tell them what to do, And on this program, we have tried to maintain that tradition, where we will explain the political circumstances that you, the workers and the unions, find yourself in. Okay? If you engage in a struggle with the employers, we will embrace you. We'll come in solidarity. But this thing only makes sense if you are prepared, you the workers and the unions and the union leadership, are prepared to fight for the members, and workers prepared to fight for themselves. And this is what is sad in this equation. This is what is sad. And you see, this is why, many times people want us to spend time knocking the PPP. I'll be doing that all the time, and the easiest thing to do is to knock the PPP. But I keep telling people that we have to do some self, inspection, and to see whether our own behaviors, individually and collectively, is not contributing to our demise. And I am convinced that workers and the leadership have to, face this reality. I can't see no reasonable excuse for them not to come out in open condemnation and clear, reaction to the budget. I know it will take time to organize, protests and strike and so. That's a different stage. That's a different stage. But I can't understand this almost muted response of the unions on the budget. If one go through the Guyanese papers of foreigners, you will believe that the unions have no problem with this budget. Because you can't.
Maybe they don't.
I hope it's not that bad. Oh. I hope it's not that bad. No, because if it is that bad, we're in a very, very bad place.
Okay, but I want to return to this, because you've been touting this a lot on this program about the PPP as a working class party. Which PPP are you talking about? That's a traditional or current position of
No, that's the historical position the PPP takes. And when it suits them now, they will also say they're interested in the working class. And they'll tell you the manifesto that look after the working class. So I'm holding them to that. I'm saying that if you say you got any commitment to working people, you're a major employer of a large section of workers, and you're going to treat the workers with this kind of contempt, it wouldn't happen on the Jagon, I'm telling you. It won't happen on the Burnham.
That is why I'm asking you, because the PPP that you're talking about is...
They're anti-working class, but I know that. But I'm saying they won't come out and say they're anti-working class. Their propaganda will be, we are the party of the working class and the working people, and so forth and so forth.
But the PPP is, they will say that even now, as you said, but when they're speaking like that, they're not speaking for us.
No.
When they say working class, their working class refers to a particular ethnic section of the society.
That may be true, but even they have over 30-something% of their people, Indians, are in the public sector, workers and in the public sector.
They find means of supplementing their wages. many ways. I mean, look, for instance, I mean, there have been none of the commissions that are the service commissions are in place, but you'd be surprised to know the number of promotions that have already taken place within the public service. I mean, people are just receiving calls that look to take up this position, you to take up that position. So by the time the commissions are actually in place, their work has already been done, you know. So I mean, and you know who the people who they're putting in the position. So when we talk about this working class business, they will fight you on that, but their concept of working class refers to Indians. That is their mindset. Because like I've said, and I continue to argue, that any gains that Africans would have made, even under the brief period of 5 years of the APNU, that Jack Dew is fighting to take it back and to put them even further in a position of impoverishment than prior to that 5 years. They have had us in that for 23 years. And in the 5 years, some gains were made in terms of the salary increases that were given. But they're taking that back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but you see, but my point is, Jack D only could do that because we allow him to do it. You see,
I agree with you on that.
You see, we're dealing with politics, right? And we know exactly what is the PP line of march. I mean, look, there's no spontaneous protest against the budget coming from no section of the public sector workers. No block of African people, even if you say the Indian public sector workers is PPP. I mean, you see, in a social process, we are acting like social, I don't want to say scientists, but you know, in politics, we have to try to read the tempo of the country. We have to try to read the balance of forces, social and political forces. Okay? And I am, as a practitioner, watching at the way in which the African community, if you want to make it African specific, the African workers and working class has responded to this budget. There's not one spontaneous protest. Now, those are important realities because the PP is watching, and those are the things that Jack Deon and the PP tries to watch at. We do them this, nothing will happen. And then they become more contemptuous because they say you don't have the will to fight. And that is why on programs that I'm on in recent times, I hardly spend a lot of time on what the PP doing. Because I think we all know what the PP doing. We don't need education to what the PP doing. What we need is education and inspiration to fight back against what the PP doing. You know? And I'm saying that we have to, you know, very often people reach me on the road, they stop me. We're going to say, what we doing? You know, what we all doing? You know, and these are workers, you know. You know, these are workers.
Okay.
You know, and then when you ask them, you know, what are you doing? You know, and I think there is where we have the real problem. The problem is not to educate people what the people doing. I think our constituents, you know, whether we talk about the coalition constituents, which is African and also some Indians and Amerindians, or we're talking exclusively about the African community, I think generally, okay, people know exactly the line of march of Jack Deon PVP, and they know the condition that they're in. The struggle is to get them to move from knowing to fighting. And now that they have lifted they said they lift the restrictions, I hope we will be moving back to more normal politics. Because I'm telling you, until the fight starts on the streets, we ain't gonna get nowhere. So that is where the energies have to go. And that is why I'm disappointed with the organized workers and the unions. Because nobody on this earth, faced with what they're faced with, one of the largest budgets in the history of the country, and a government in give a commitment to increasing public sector workers, when the public sector workers in the Guyana is one of the poorest in the Caribbean and has been in this impoverished state for over two decades. And you can't see a clear response from the unions.
They're working it out, you know. I think they're working out their response. We still have to wait and see.
Yeah, we have to wait. But, my brother, politics doesn't sit and wait on you. The enemy planning.
Yeah.
You see, the other side planning. You know. So I'm hopeful, as you said, they're planning. But I don't know. You have to plan to speak out. You have to plan to bring your people out in protest and to close down the place and so. But you don't have to plan to speak out, man, to denounce the budget.
I know. When I say that, I'm just being facetious, you know. But I don't know. I mean, it's a tragedy, really. And despite, I mean, it's not for the lack of criticism. We have been speaking about it. But even in the face of the criticisms of the union, there is no seeming attempt to even respond to your...
Yeah, no, our criticism is for total criticism because we're more concerned with the interests. And we know that we're political people. We understand the political nature of the beast we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that if you don't show some fight, you get nothing from the PPP. They're only going to respond to fight.
But I mean, the world at large, if the world is looking on, and they are seeing what has been happening here, the message that we are sending is that we are comfortable and we're happy that nothing, like I said, when approaches were made to the Obama administration requesting support for the travesties that were taking place under the PPP regime during that period, the response, my understanding was, but we don't see anybody in the streets. We don't see any kind of movement to suggest that people are dissatisfied. So if you're not representing your own self-interest, there is no evidence that you are so motivated to move in that direction, then others will believe that you're comfortable. How can we raise our voices in support of something that apparently is not there? And that is the problem that we have, that people who may want to support us, we are not giving them the opportunity to come out and to say, well, look, we are behind you in this, because we're doing nothing.
And you see another vexed issue. I mean, I'm glad you raised the question how possible foreign, for total support. You see, people look at Guyana and they say, okay, we agree y'all got an ethnic problem. But they say, look, you with the majority of the police force, you majority of the army. Mm-hmm. These are your areas of strength. And how you will claim that the Indian regime oppressing you, using your own people to oppress you? Something are wrong with you. You know, and it creates confusion in the equation. You see? So, you know, there are behaviors from us African people that is counterproductive to our own liberation and counterproductive to the total liberation of the country. You know, if an Indian regime could use a black security apparatus to suppress black people, okay, then people watching on outside Guyana would not be too concerned. Not be too concerned because you suppressing yourself.
Well, it's not a historical thing. I mean, check the South Africa, Rhodesia, and all those places.
Yeah, but it's a little different there because those regimes and so, you know, were supported by the might of the white world and so forth, you know. But I mean, this here is a unique thing. 90% of the security forces vote for the coalition, the PNC in the coalition. So you know where the political loyalties lie.
Yeah.
But somehow we believe that where we have assets, you know, these assets must not be used for our political advancement. And that is the problem, you know. And these very soldiers and police has come to Ogunseye and ask me what we're doing.
Yeah.
I'm amazed. I mean, I listen to them. I got to deal with them respectfully, you know. But I'm amazed, you know. And that is why I have been spending so much time interrogating African behavior, interrogating the behavior, you know. And I know it's offend some, you know, African people. I know it offends some even PNC members and all kinds of things, you know. And the other night I was on David's program with Comrade Burke, you know, and we were discussing issues, and I raised some serious matters as it relates to the PNC, but we're not going to do that today, you know. And I know it offends some PNC people, but it's tough love. Unless we begin to address these matters as an African community, unless we begin not and to find answers, we're going to be complaining for the next 20 years. And that is what worries me. And that is the destiny we're creating for the generation of Africans to come. Because you see, the thing about power and money, and time is not on our side. Look, when you look at the structure of the Guyanese economy, let us say a private person coming to Guyana to do business. You're looking for a local partner. There is no African local partner of any significance. It's Indians, Chinese, or Portuguese. And economics don't wait for you. As the country, oil money come in, and as the country starts to diversify and other sectors of the economy begin to develop, more and more people are coming, more people looking for collaboration, and all they're going to find is Indian, Portuguese, and Chinese. Amerindians and Africans ain't got no stakes. And when that is being consolidated economically, it also is being consolidated politically, because these people become partners and allies. So we don't have a lot of time on our hands. We have to push back and to correct this thing now. And sometimes our leaders behave like though we have a lot of time. You know, we could play this game that they're playing, and that is what worries me. And that is why I'm committed to put a lot of pressure on them. You know, at my age, I really don't care, because I ain't looking for no work. I ain't looking for no. There ain't no competitive struggle for positions with them. I am bringing to bear my over half a century experience in defense of the African community and in defense of the nation, because I'm convinced, I've always been, and that's been our politics. If we defend ethnic communities' interests, whether it's African, American, or Indian interests, okay, to the extent that you defend that in a principled way, based upon equality and justice, you strengthen the body politics of the nation. And ultimately, people keep forgetting that the nation problems have an internal aspect, but they also have an external aspect. And we have a lot of vultures are coming in to eat us up.
Yeah. Well, ExxonMobil has already begun that in terms of the way they're treating our workers. And there are agencies that are being used to recruit and to employ. And even the Minister of Labor he couldn't hide that, because the workers were coming out and complaining that within the contracts that the workers are signing is the clause that they are not allowed to join unions and all of these things and so on. So these agencies that are recruiting and employing, they are committed to treating the workers in the same way as the government is treating right? They want to pay you. They're actually being paid for the service they're providing, and then they're paying the workers basically the slave wages, next to nothing, right? And nobody seems to be pushing to have that corrected. I don't want to see where this meeting that the Minister of Labor had with these agents, where it will take us, whether it will lead to some kind of improvement in what has been happening. Because people recently they're talking about health insurance and all of that. A friend of mine was at one of the hospitals the other day, and they brought in an employee from off one of the rigs over there. And they basically got injured while on the job. And they were actually trying to get him to pay for his medical expenses. And the argument was back and forth, and what they were saying that he was not in his location on the rig at the time when the accident took place. So he was out of his jurisdiction, and so it's his. They had no liability and all these things you're talking about, you know. But the guy was very, very firm in his stance that, you know, it's not his expense. He was on the work site. He was, and they had a ding dong going at that private hospital. You see what I'm talking about? So these are people that are raping the country. And even in an instance where a worker's life, his health, has become affected by working for that agency, you are being treated as though, you know, and we don't know how many examples like that are out there.
Yeah.
Right?
I was listening to Mosley program this morning as I was in a minibus, and a lady was complaining her husband worked with one of these firms that is somehow attached to the oil industry and so. And he worked on a rig, and according to their contract, they're supposed to be paid by the 14th of the month. They get paid twice a month, must be every fortnight. Okay. And the practice now is that days are in the past, the paying date, and they ain't paying. And they tell you nothing. You know, it's a total disregard for working people's interests. You know, and people, you know, and the Guyanese workers have commitments, you know, that they have to meet, you know. But you see, that is it because it's the examples that the government set. You see, I'm convinced there's a conspiracy between the government, the local private sector, and the foreign private, the emerging foreign private sector to keep Guyanese wages in a depressed situation. It is a grand three-way conspiracy. And the workers and the leaders, you know, have to begin to fight back. You know, they have to begin to fight back. Because that is every part of the world, man. I mean, even go outside Guyana, because sometimes you know, you get weary to even look. I mean, our own history of trade unionism, our own history has been a history where every major social or economic advancement we make as workers, or we make, okay, as a nation, came out of struggle. You know, came out of struggle. You know, and this notion that somehow we're going to get advancement based upon some goodwill of the PPP or goodwill of politicians, you know, it's a farce. You're only going to get progress when you prepare to fight for it, because at the end of the day, in our class, society like ours is a question of interest. And if you don't make your interest a priority, nobody got time with you. Okay. And this is what I'm trying to instill into the workers' mind and their head. That money has never been a problem. The problem is always priority. That is what affects the working people and the poor. That we have never developed a political system that puts the interests of working people and the poor, okay, as in the forefront. Even when the times when we declare, you know, that commitment to the working people and all kinds of things, it was only rhetoric. But when the test is, watch at the spending of the government. Watch the way in which they deal with workers' wages and salaries. Watch the way they're dealing with social things that are important to the working people. And you get the answer. And Guyanese workers has to be more aggressive. They have to be more aggressive. And if the union leadership is a problem, you got to push them aside and do what you got to do and force them to legitimize your action. I said on a previous program, if you watch how the sugar workers in this country had behaved from the colonial times throughout, whether there was the PNC in power or whoever in power, even when the PP in power. Sugar workers is the workers that strike more than any other workers in this country. As a result of it, they have forced a certain level of respect. And public sector workers who are in a strategic area of the state, the government machine can't function for long without the public sector workers. But the public sector workers have over time have never developed the reputation to fight. And that is why they're in this condition even at this point of plenty. And I can't overemphasize the need for them to fight, because that is the only solution.
Okay. All right, brother. Well, let me just brief announcement. Anuncio los hispanohablantes que están viviendo aquí en Guyana, si quieren aprender inglés y necesitan un profesor, pueden contactarme en 662-7529. Otra vez, anuncio los hispanohablantes que están viviendo aquí en Guyana, si quieren aprender inglés y necesitan un profesor, pueden llamarme por teléfono en 662-7529. Those people who are the Spanish-speaking people here in Guyana, if you are interested in learning English and you need a personal tutor, then you can call me on 662-7529 and we can make an arrangement to have classes held for you so that you can improve your ability to communicate in the English language. All right, so that's just out there for you. Yes, my brother. What you're saying there is key. But I noticed in response to your letter to the newspaper that Rastom Dalgety was hitting at the church, saying that historically the church has been a fighter on the side of the poor and the powerless. But even the church now seems to have gone dormant. What is your take on that?
I think he has a point. You know, he has a point. You know, it's tragic. But even the major African organizations, I'm going to call me one organization, AGDA, have gone relatively quiet in terms of militancy. You know, it's you know, and you know, we have to you know, engage in tough love. You know, I really, you know, I remember in AGDA we had some discussion. When you know the coalition was formed, when the APMU was formed, and you know it helped to rebuild the PNC electoral showing, and then the hopes was high that the African people may be able to, you know, return to power. And then when we had the coalition, you know, the possibility when the AFC joined, and the situation looked very much going to be in our favor in the sense that we're going to defeat the PVP, and you know, and Africans will get we used to have some debates whether the return to power of the African political class is in the best interest of the African masses.
Okay.
What effects it will got? Would it make them more militant or less militant? Would it disarm them? Okay. And you know, we used to got those discourse. And the 5 years of the coalition, in my view, have had a kind of disarming effect on our people. You know, the PNC, you know, as the major political constituency party in the African community, they were so tied to conventional politics. Okay, and they see party politics, I would say, the most, you know, in a way that is most not in our best interest.
Okay.
You see? Now, they then use the opportunity in government to encourage black African people and their supporters to fight. They use their position in power to tell we don't fight for nothing. They're going to fix it. You get something, don't fight, man.
Okay.
Where when you people was under 20-something years of PPP oppression, now you had to strengthen unions and urge them to fight, build up the capacity to fight. Don't matter we in power. People didn't stop Gawu from fighting, even when the people in power and Gawu fighting against them. You see, the point I'm trying to make is that we see politics in such a narrow sense, you know, that we don't understand to the extent that we empower our people. I know about financial empowerment now. We're talking about political empowerment, psychological empowerment. Teach them the art of fighting, where they're weak, strengthen the unions, encourage militancy, force them to fight, encourage fighting in these institutions. Then they put pressure on the government. And in so doing, the government will have to respond and do better. But what you'll also be doing is lifting, you know, your supporters to a position of militancy. So when you lose government, you got fighting troops. Now we lose government with a set of troops that get battered up. And under the 5 years, they then recover. And that's what make it hard now. That see the PPs, you see, people don't understand. The PP strategists study these things. A lot of people forget that a lot of PPP was trained in Moscow and the Eastern European countries. And those people pay a lot of attention, you know, to working class behavior and people's human behavior and how to engage people. And they look a lot at your capacity to fight. Because at the end of the day, despite the rhetoric, if you're not prepared to fight, it doesn't mean nothing. And that is the yardstick they use. And that is what PPP is schooled in. And our leaders doesn't understand that support must not be docile support. Support must not be uncritical support. Support must, for me, support of our people must mean they're putting pressure upon we to do better. Forcing we to do better.
No.
And I'm telling you, if when the Granger administration, the coalition came to power, and they increased their salaries of the ministers, and they failed to struck a collective bargaining with the public sector workers and give a decent increase in wage, the workers will close the government down for just one day. I'm telling you, this government will be power today. But particularly the public sector workers and them, they do nothing in the self-interest. And they do it because the government, okay, who was onto them, and they're onto the government, you know, they struck up this deal that don't rock the boat. You can fix things in time, thinking that, you know, politics is something that you could guarantee. You can't. What you talking about electoral politics? You got no real guarantee, especially in our situation where we had won the elections only by about 4,000 votes. There's no guarantee in the formula. Therefore, you don't win by 6 seats. Say another election, and lose 2 seats, and still you go win by 4. And you see, and because they never had they encouraged political discussions, neither within the APMU, neither within the coalition, and neither within the PNC party groups, and neither within the African community. And that is why we're in this state.
No, but a lot of it has to do, I mean, I wanted to ask you now, well, if it were a politics of accommodation on the APNU government, what really it is now that is preventing them from moving forward. But maybe you can answer that.
Weakness and fear. You know, it's a set of troops who are not battle ready. And that's what you're seeing. So when they face the enemy, they get cold-feeted. That is the reality. Our people are cold-feeted, they're beaten down. You know?
No, but a part of it too is the fact that people, after the behavior of the coalition, a lot of our people became despondent, and because you dealt with a government that really was only for itself, right? The ministers of the government, people couldn't get to them. The agents that were even the PNC, we must admit, had actually become a fragment of what it really was because of the isolation of the politics of Granger. And only the other day, a young lady and I were discussing, and she said his whole idea was basically what he has done is to weaken the PPP, the PNC. He has basically weakened the forces that should have been fighting now to the point where people are so beaten down. And then to put a nail in the coffin, when he decided not to adhere to have discussions on the decision to quit or not to quit and so on, and just acted in his own interest as far as we're concerned, to protect himself from whatever, you don't know what Pompeo and those told him, that it drove the final nail in the coffin. And so now we have the task of bringing people back to that position where they begin to see themselves as really a part of the fight. Once more, they understand that they have to fight, but the motivation is what is lacking. And it's that motivation that we have to work on.
Yes, yeah. I agree with you. I agree with everything you say. But I'm saying that people have to have responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, certainly.
You see?
But
and I'm saying as a collective, Granger couldn't do what he did as a one person if there weren't an infrastructure in the PNC that allows it. And if there wasn't political culture in the PNC and in the African community that allows it, it wouldn't have happened. You see? And I'm saying that if Africans, was politically sharp, that's why we got to continue doing this. There got to be a difference between party politics and African community politics. You see, because party politics has its limitations. It has its fixed interests. But if you're smart as a community, politically agile, you will know that as a community we got to define the interests and what we want and make it clear to them what we want and just make sure that they deliver it. But it's the other way around. Is that the PNCs define the interests and then they pass it on to the community. And many times there's a big disconnect between the community and the party. And I'm saying that politics is not a one-man show. Watch what is doing to Granger now. You say, okay, they get rid of Granger, so they vote Granger and the Granger, who would conceive as Granger people. So they always had the power. You see? But it is the question of the mental state, what they've been trained in. You see? So you have resources. It's like the armed forces. They vote historically for the coalition, they vote for the PNC. But they don't translate that to say as an important institutions in the society that we have a duty to say to whoever in government, man, there are some bottom lines, and while we adhere to the Constitution, we're not going to adhere to the Constitution to the point that you going to tell me go and shoot down my brother and my sister. You're going to tell me that if my brother and sister say they want more political space and so, that I gotta go and beat them up. No, there's a bottom line that in this democracy, the military is for external use. The military is not to be used to suppress the local population. And as an African military that comes out to the African community, we have a vested interest in what happens to our future and our children. And while we don't want ethnic domination, we want ethnic fair play. And as an institution in the country, we have a right to contribute to ethnic parity and fair play.
No, that's beautifully put. But when you got people like the current Prime Minister, arguing vehemently that, basically saying that he never took a position that was aligned in any sense to any political party. I don't have a problem with that. But what he's essentially pointing out is that his interest is not in black people.
Well, he never took a position as aligned to any party, but we don't know.
Well,
we don't know.
That,
No, you see here, man.
And he was the leader of the armed forces.
Yeah.
So we have a problem with ourselves.
This is the point. That's the point I'm making. Right. Our problem is a large percentage we.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, and it is painful to discuss these things, and I know it hurt our people when I discuss it. I know it hurt them.
Okay.
And I know they're not comfortable with me, and they're not comfortable with this kind of discussion. But I also know, unless we do it, I mean, get over this hurdle, the people can dominate you for the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that is what worries me.
Yeah, but it also speaks to the mindset of the current PM that, and all the others who are part, as we've argued here, they're mostly concerned with themselves. They're looking at their self-interest. And that is one of the problems that I believe that we face, that people do not generally align their interests to the broader sphere of their being. That it's personal, and once I am being satisfied and whatever I'm looking for, I'm getting, then to hell with the masses and even the community from which I've come. But the others don't think like that.
Yeah, but people have learned how to deal with those elements, I mean, I don't want to discuss certain things you can't discuss with the program, but people learn to deal with those elements. You can't benefit, look, whatever individual, I'm talking about black people now, I want to keep a little African specific.
This is African.
You understand? So that
the month is dedicated to us.
Yes,
yeah.
I want to keep the African specific just for the sake of this program. No African person in this country could say he or she didn't benefit from the collective struggle of African community or ancestors coming through over time. Whether they become a soldier, whether they become a politician, whether they become a doctor, they become a nurses, the infrastructure and the thing that allow you to become who you become was built upon collective struggle and sacrifice. So you ain't got no your personal claim on things got limits. Even on yourself got limits. And the community has the right to insist that you behave in a certain way, and if you don't want to behave in a certain way, we pull you in line. You see? But you see, that is where, because we don't have real effective communal politics, they could get away with it. You see? Because party politics give them certain amount of space that they can maneuver. Because the party politics is there, race is important. What is important is ideology. What is important is the national interest, and you got a space for maneuver. But you see, we get the worst out of it because the Indian community, they didn't experience 200 odd years of slavery. Okay. They have the culture intact. They're more cohesive. Mm-hmm. There's certain things that you got to fight to get African people to do. Indian politicians, you don't have to fight Indian people to do. So we got two different challenges. Indians is very clear that to the extent, for Indians, Guyana is important to the extent that Guyana is important to Indians. And Indians see Indian advancement, okay,
as a collective,
as a collective
movement,
okay, is critical to national advancement. They don't make this separation. But we grew up in a medicine, a political medicine that tells you nation is separate from the race. So the party will call you to make all kinds of sacrifices for the nation. But when you raise your ethnic concerns, no. And that is where we suffer. And I'm saying that we must learn, man. We got some of the, what hurt me is that, we got more bright people now, they say, than we had in the 40s and the 30s. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, university graduates, this, that. And we are worse off capacity to fight in this, in this hard, ruthless world. We haven't learned the ABCs a struggle. There could be no Guyana that is worth defending unless there's a clear African stakes in the country. There is no Guyana that is worth defending from the Amerindian point of view unless there's an Amerindian stakes in the country. There is no Guyana that is worth defending from an Indian point of view unless there's an Indian stakes in the country. You know, and we have to, other people are clear on that, but we're not clear on it.
So, you were saying that you're fighting, you're educating people in this regard. And you mentioned that even the African groups seem to have lost that push to guide us in this direction. So, what are you telling us now to do as a people? You talk about the army, you talk about the police, and you talk about the individuals who the trade unions, and then these individuals who are basically serving their own interests and are willing to even sacrifice their lives of their people to ensure that their personal interests are protected and guaranteed. So what are you urging us now to do? You said fight in our interests. You wouldn't want to say openly the kind of fight, but where do we go from here?
Look, I think we reach a point where we have to have some great assembly of African people in this country. At some point.
Okay.
Parties, churches, cultural organizations, everybody, trade unions, okay, to look at the African condition and to look at the possibilities of oil and gas and to work out, to understand the logic of our historical moment. That if Africans doesn't fight to have some accelerated economic development in the equation, with the best intention of foreign capital, we're going to be end up into economic slavery. We and the Amerindians. So we have to have this meeting of minds, because struggle for struggle, you gotta get a meeting of the minds. Okay? It is not for me, Ogunseye, to tell the African community exactly how they must fight. I tell in the general sense. But we have to come as a collective or political or social or religious forces and sit down and iron out the way forward. And for me, I am convinced elections are important because we are a country that is tied to the electoral democracy, okay, and periodical elections. So that becomes an important part in the fight back. But I'm convinced that even before we reach the next election, which is about 4 years away, there has to be a massive fight by African people, okay, to make the point that enough is enough. We draw the line in the sand. We have to be able to mass our people throughout our community in the thousands under some clear demands long before the next elections, and begin to push back. Because if you get a PP 5 years with the oil money, you're going to be elections, fair and free elections, going to be a waste of time. Because they're going to corrupt everybody. They got so much money to do with the like. Okay, because elections not just for voting, money is by votes. That's why in most modern parts of the world, they put in limitations on how much parties could spend in elections, because people realize that with money, okay, you make elections look a mockery. Dollars speak. Not you know. And I'm saying that is the reality before us. We have to have a meeting of African minds. We have to have a strategy for elections, but more important, we have to have a strategy before elections that will put this country and this government, okay, on notice that enough is enough. You see, unless you could do that, there's nothing for the PP to work with. The PP, look, I'm telling you, Jangan people are stupid. You see, the USAID called for power sharing.
I was just going to deal with that. All right, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, as a WPA person, we have called for power sharing for over 2 decades, and it has been falling upon deaf ears. Now, at this historic juncture, an important foreign agency is telling us, look, with this oil money we all got, if you all don't fix your politics right and your governance right, what they're telling you, y'all gonna kill one another. So this already they're telling you, if you don't fix this thing right, and to fix it right, you got to end the winner take all mentality who WPA is saying over 2 decades ago. Okay? You have to end the governance where a party with 51% of the votes get all the power. You got to end it. This is too divided ethnically society for that kind of politics. And that you have to find a way of sharing the executive power of the country and to build consensus based upon executive power sharing. This is what they're telling you. Or else you're going to fight and kill one another. They mention the killing part of it, but that's the logic of it. Because they know what happened elsewhere with oil and money. Because you know, the stakes here high. The stakes here high. We got a million and one reason why we should fight, you know, to the last over these resources. You know, and the people are telling you that, you look, y'all got to make up your mind. Or is this thing, this oil and this wealth, okay, going to drive you all in a direction that y'all gonna have no return. And I think they're quite right. And I think it as a WPA person, I feel satisfied that the insight that we give to the country 2 decades ago, that ultimately how you twist it and you turn it, if this country is to be governable and to achieve economic and social progress, that in the interests of all Guyanese, you got to share executive power, you got to end the winner-take-all system, okay, and you have to have a genuine national reconciliation.
Now, with Jagdeo alive, how realistic is that goal? Isn't it something utopic that you're...
No. Jagdeo will be pushed aside.
Okay.
Let me tell you, you gotta understand politics. Jagdeo is only Jagdeo because the African community and the rest of Guyanese are fighting back. Therefore, in the PPP, he's the star. He got, them same people get rid of him. No, I mean, the bigger, more powerful people than Jagdeo in most greater countries than Jagdeo. When the politics get and you become useless, people get rid of you. So Jagdeo is only useful to the PPP. Okay, no, because the shots that he called seems to be working. And it's working because we allowed it to work. But the day we stop to work and the day we follow our forces, both political, social, military, cultural, religion, and we confront them, irrelevance become depreciated and become a liability to the PPP and a liability to the Indian community. And the forces of reconciliation, both among the PPP and the Indian and African community and the American community, get ascendancy. And the forces of division and divisiveness that Jagdeo represent will be swept aside. So I'm not worried about Jagdeo. I am worried about we.
Okay.
Jagdeo going to be history. Jagdeo could be history in the next 24 months in this country. Or it could be history holding on for the next 10 years if we allow it. Jagdeo fate there in the African community hand. If we got Jagdeo fate in we hand. But we don't believe though.
I quite understand that. No, well, you have said a whole lot, and I quite agree with a lot of what you've said, and I'm particularly interested in your last comment in relation to Jagdeo, because we are aware that he is the divisive element within the Guyanese society, and he does have his backers within the Indian community, those like I don't want even to call his name, who heads that security force, who is from time to time shouting out about killing and doing a lot of stuff. But like I'm saying, we allow these people to get away with these things. We don't retaliate when they behave in the way they do. And unless we begin to do that in a concerted way, in a way that is properly managed, all right, the backs of the PPP were against the wall in 2002-2005, but that was a chaotic arrangement with no proper guidance, no leadership, and all of that. And so that went awry. But if we are to organize ourselves in relation to the request of the USAID for a response to prevent an escalation of violence and division, then we have to organize ourselves as a community to take a collective step that will put a dent in the likes of Jack Deon and his cohorts. And I'm hopeful that, you know, that people will begin to understand this. You see, I was on David Hines' program some time ago, and he was asking whether the question of violence, whether we support it or not. I told him that I'm not against violence. You understand? And he seemed to be offended by that. I mean, I'm a bit surprised that it came from a guy like him, because the perception of violence seems to always be that, you know, this is an ethnic warfare between African and Indians. But violence doesn't have to be that. There is strategic violence that can bring about the necessary changes that we are seeking, and we have to organize that kind of violence to make the government understand, and the agents who are keeping us in this divide and suppressing one section of the nation, that they become clearly aware that if they don't change, then they become, you know, liabilities within the context of the war that is being waged within the environment. And that is what I'm saying. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, Africans running across from an African community and invading an Indian community, and this, there can be strategic.
You see, we have developed a culture in this society, and the truth is, Guyanese society is a very violent society. I mean, any serious sociological analysis society is a very, we society developed to slavery. What could be more violent than slavery? And colonialism was a very violent business. And we have been, our institutions, our national institution perpetuate violence against the population. Okay? The problem is the population have not developed sufficiently to develop counter-violence, you know, in their own defense. You see? And violence doesn't necessarily mean burning and shooting and chopping up somebody's hand or so. Violence means, you know, using the whatever means you have at your disposal to push back against those who are oppressing you. You know, if a man lash you with a stick, you pick up a stick, you lash you back. You know, he was violence to you, if you call it violence, and you violent back to him.
Well,
you know, I mean, I don't see no wrong with it.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah. I ain't allow a man point a gun to me, and I got gun here, and I ain't point it back to he.
I quite agree.
You know what I mean? So you know, and we mustn't. You see, I don't allow this talk about violence to intimidate me. I'm a very peaceful person. I don't think nobody could. Either in politics long. I don't think no political person, any political party, they will point that Ogun never assault them. But I was assaulted by other people from other political parties. You know? But not now because I assault them.
And I know you as a man, you got the capacity to assault.
I could assault people.
I
know. You know, but the point is, what I'm saying is that the poor and the oppressed, the ruling classes always want us, okay, to be committed to non-violence and peace, while they're committed to violence and hostility to you. And I'm saying no. We don't want no reckless violence, but we want our people to be in a state. If it becomes necessary, we could defend ourselves.
And so we have to prepare for that. Right? I guess we may have just a few minutes more, so let me remind mis amigos de Venezuela y otros países españoles, anuncio los hispanohablantes que están aquí en Guyana Si quieren aprender inglés y necesitan un profesor, pueden llamarme por teléfono en 662-7529. ¿Ok? Los hispanohablantes que están viviendo aquí en Guyana, si quieren aprender inglés y necesitan un profesor, pueden llamarme por teléfono en 662-7529. All right, so I will be looking forward to your calls so that we can make possible arrangements for that. So, Brother Ogun, in closing, what are your closing thoughts as we move forward? We didn't get to talk about the Sue and Jack Leo and then the big conference that they had at the Marriott and the Pegasus and so on, but possibly.
I want to close where I start. You see, I think given the historic moment, it is critical that organized labor rise to the moment, because it will make matters much more simple for us if the organized working people is clear upon the agenda, the line of march, and we become more, we know exactly what we got to support. It is hard as a political practitioner. If I gotta speak to people, they may not be workers, they might be unemployed, they might be persons who are self-employed, okay? And you have to talk to them as a political person. And you don't have a sense where the organized labor stand on a straightforward matter like wages and salaries for their members. It becomes difficult, to tell other unorganized people to fight for these workers. But if the workers are fighting their case, it is easy for me as a political person to tell the unemployed, tell the market people, you have to, join in solidarity with the workers who are engaging a just struggle. Because when they get more money, if you're the market person, they buy more in the market, so you can make the connection. So a lot of emotion in the political and social equation could be hastened if the working people, decide that they're fighting more and more in their own interests. And as they're fighting the interests, okay, that interest will be connected with other sections of the working people, okay, and other stratas, and put pressure on the rulers. And I'm telling you, the PPP and the interest that dominates the PPP, the last thing they want to do is lose power. And under pressure, okay, they will share power. And if and now you have the American agency signaling where the thing Guyana should go, the people is more and more pressure coming on them. And if we don't do what we ought to do, then we will release them from the pressure. So the more we fight, okay, for our rights, more we fight for reconfiguration of governance, to a power sharing arrangement, to an arrangement that is more equal and more just. Okay, we create more and more pressure on them, not only internally, but more and more pressure on them externally. And they can't stand up they can't stand up and totally ignore those two kinds of pressures. And common sense will tell them, and a lot of other Indian interests will tell them, you reach at a juncture where you have to make a compromise. That the road that Jagdeo or the PP is on is not in the interest of the Indian community, and it will lead to mutual destruction. And as an Indian, we don't want to go down the road. But if we don't mount the pressure, then they will get jagged on the people the benefit of the doubt. And you can't vex with them. You know, so I'm saying everything from here onwards in our hands.
Yeah.
We could call we have to call the shot. And if we don't call the shot, we gotta blame ourselves. If you want to wait 10 years from now for call the shot, well then you got people who will be back for 10 years.
Yeah. And by that time, like they're giving away all the lands on the highway already again, they've started that again and so on. Anyway, Brother Ogun, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. I think your thoughts were very useful and very instructive. And I'm hopeful that those who are out there and who are listening, particularly our political leaders and our union leaders, even the church leaders, that they can begin to have some kind of introspection and begin to understand that they have a very significant roles to play in making this country one that is livable for everybody and maintaining a semblance of peace and where prosperity for all can be a possibility.
Peace with justice.
Right? Yes, and so on. So, to the people who have been watching this evening's program, I want to thank you for being with us, and I look forward to being with you next week when we continue to have these discourses. Do have a pleasant night, and look forward for Walter Rodney Groundings, same time, same channel, when we discuss more current issues. Blessings.